Long ago, players were stuck with whatever team they committed to as freshmen. They started at this one school, stayed there until they graduated or entered the NBA draft.
But there was a cosmic change that altered the world as we know it. A pathway entered, known only as the portal. Players could now go from team to team without any restriction.
But 16 legendary teams wielding the powers of NIL wished to conquer each other and claim decisive victory, known to claim a championship. It became known as
Mortal
Mortal Kombat.
Kombat! Hey everybody, and welcome back to the show. Excuse our silliness, but today we are tracking the transfer portal. We're also going to give some smaller updates on freshman decommits that have taken place and a quick look at the SEC and the NBA playoffs that's already going down now.
So the 90s kid in me is beyond excited, and in the spirit of our stupid Mortal Kombat theme today, we've added some Mortal Kombat quotes along the way in today's episode. So enjoy, and let's get started.
All right, choose your fighter. That'll be our first way to get started here. Here are the top 10 players in the transfer portal, according to On3 at time of recording. Right now, you got Maxine Rennan at center from Stanford. Jonelle Davis, who we just got word may not be academically eligible to play at Michigan. Clifford Omahari, I'm probably butchering that name, out of Rutgers. Jonas Adu out of Tennessee is sitting at 4. Great Osabor out of Utah State. Jeremy Roach out of Duke. Golden out of FAU. Brandon Garrison out of Oklahoma State. Rylan Griffin out of Alabama, and Amari Williams out of Drexel. A couple of those names tied to different programs, but we're going to see where they are tied up into here pretty quickly. But yeah,
And
there's a lot of big names in that list, Maddie.
definitely. And one of those top 10 names is generating quite a bit of attention, especially in the SEC. Jeremy Roach from Duke, a huge name that came out of the portal and has a couple of teams that have been thought of as front runners.
Yeah, and all of them have weirdly Kentucky ties, which just makes the situation just that much more comical or better, depending on how you want to define that.
Yeah, so Jeremy Roach's rumored leaders in the transfer portal are currently listed at St. John's, Kentucky, and Arkansas.
Yeah, so you got Rick Pitino, you got John Calipari, and then Mark Pope at Kentucky. Just what world are we living in here? This is so weird. But yeah, last season for Duke, Roach averaged 14 points a game, over 3 assists a night, and he played over 30 minutes a game. He actually had a really good game, if I remember correctly, at Bud Walton when they came to Arkansas and Fayetteville during the ACC SEC Challenge. He's a huge target for anybody and a big time player at the point guard position. He could really be a solid building piece for next year. For your next year team, depending on where he lands. That's why I really like him to Kentucky or Arkansas, which really doesn't have a roster at this given moment. But one of those two teams should be very competitive in NIL for him and have a lot to offer for him to replace to play. Big time programs, big time target. It all kind of makes sense.
Definitely. You mentioned he played over 30 minutes a game, started in 33 out of the 35 games that he played. So a lot of experience to be brought to whichever team he chooses. Like you said, a big get for either program. So I think it's going to be a good one we're going to get to talk about in the SEC, hopefully, unless St. John's decides to lead the way.
Yeah, definitely. And it's another one of these players right now that we've been seeing this trend over the last week nationally with the great Duke exodus or whatever guys are talking about. Like there's a lot of players leaving with this class that's coming in for Duke and a lot of intimidation as far as that goes. And then I don't know necessarily the entire situation, because I'm not a Duke follower, but there's been players who have just been leaving left and right for Duke. We also saw Mizzou pick up one in the transfer portal as well this week. So it'll be curious to see where these Duke players end up going. And if it was an NIL situation or if it was just a playing time situation with some of these players coming in from Duke's new freshman class.
Yeah, for sure. So let's jump into another big name that's in the top 10, Brandon Garrison out of Oklahoma State. He is going to be a huge big man. Take that as you will for any team. He saw about 20 minutes a game for Oklahoma State and put up a decent amount of production at over 7 points.
Yeah, front runners here are Oklahoma and Texas, and I've heard a lot about Texas when it comes to Garrison. Wouldn't shock me if we hear something over this week or even before this episode premieres tonight. Just a lot of talk that he's going to be a Longhorn, but I like the guy. He could be a great ad for any team that he goes to. Only real concern is his offense, but let's not forget that that's not exactly, it wasn't exactly like Oklahoma State was out here as the greatest team in the world to prop up this kid's offense last season. This team only won, I believe, what was it, 12 games this year? Like Oklahoma State was really, really bad. So I'm curious to see what kind of production he can add to a more, substantially grounded team for next season.
Yeah, I think you take a look at Garrison and get him some solid coaches around him that can help him develop. And this kid could be, somebody that we talk about on the daily. Like you said, fantastic on the defensive front, just some stuff to work on offense. So, like I said, you get some development around him, and there's no telling how far he could go.
Certainly. Well, right now there are a couple of teams screaming, get over here for a few transfers. And here's a look at your heavy projection or guys that are 100% committed on three. So Maddie, there's some names on this list that I've actually heard other teams being interested into, but Javon Porter, Pop Isaacs, Elijah Martin, Noah Reynolds, all in the top 150, expected to possibly land at an SEC team. Maddie?
Yeah, I mean, they are some major movers on the list, all right now projected to go to Ole Miss.
Except for Javon Porter, yeah.
At this point, one of these big things that a lot of people may not be realizing, Chris Beard's working the portal, and it may be an interesting year for Ole Miss going into the season.
Yeah, I have heard rumor that the Elijah Martin thing, I know what On3's saying is that like it's 100% on their projection, but I've heard rumor that Elijah Martin might be headed to Florida too. So that one's the one that I'm the most curious about. But Pop Isaacs was a big time player for Texas Tech. Noah Reynolds was a big time player. So there's definitely guys on this list that can add a lot. Noah Reynolds coming from a mid-major program like Green Bay, a lot of these guys, out of that list, there's only one player from a power conference, and that's Pop Isaacs. So like all these players can make contribution. And then Javon Porter out of Pepperdine, who's supposed to end up with Mizzou. And yeah, Mizzou is putting together an incredible transfer class. We'll get into that just here in a minute. Also expecting this week some news on Great Osabor in the near future. I haven't seen anything official yet, but we're kind of hanging on to that, but I've heard good things for Kentucky in that department. I'll be curious to see if it's because Kentucky's getting a rumor right now that it'd be Amari Williams and Great Osabor, but they play similar position. They're both slotted to play the 4 spot, but I believe both of them are at least Osabor can be transferred over to the 5, a lot like Janai Broom. So I'll be curious to see how this all shapes out. Well, last season, there was a lot of talk about the way things are changing in the portal. Certain players couldn't play if they had previously transferred, and that rule got scrubbed thanks to the courts. So we're going to have this change this year. A new NCAA transfer rule will allow all undergraduate athletes to transfer and play immediately if they meet specific academic requirements. In other words, you can transfer now and play no matter what, so long as you are indeed academically eligible. That's not being allowed into a school. What it means is that you have met the GPA and completed the certain percentage of the degree that the NCAA requires. So yes, you got to go to class. That is the big thing. So you're still a college athlete these days, and that's what's going to be the determining factor. That should be able to be held up by the courts, since this is since the NCAA is the governing body for that, to make sure that handles all the areas when it comes to academics. But this is some of the things we heard from the AP article on this. By eliminating the so-called year in residency for transfers, an athlete must be academically eligible at previous schools and not subject to any disciplinary suspension or dismissal to compete immediately at a new school. Transferring athletes must also meet progress toward degree requirements before competing. Those are the things that I was just mentioning. And then the Florida athletic director had this to say: "We hope that this practical approach to transfer eligibility requirements will encourage student athletes to make well-informed decisions about transferring and the impacts on such a move could have on their ability to graduate on time in their degree choice, particularly as it relates to transferable credits. Florida Deputy Athletic Director and Council Chairwoman Linda Teller said. Maddie, we talked about doing some solo shows this summer. I think at some point I'm going to talk about Justice White's dissent in the Supreme Court in the Board of Regents versus NCAA case. But he basically came out and said that the Supreme Court and the court system has no idea what they're doing when it comes to college sports because they literally have never played. And Justice White was, of course, he played college football and played in the NFL. So he painted a really bleak picture that we seem to be getting closer and closer to every single day. But I think some of these changes that the NCAA is at least trying to pursue are trying to get us back into a direction that's a little bit more positive. That's just me. And I think at the end of the day, we all agree that players should be able to make, something off their name and image, and they should be able to transfer mostly freely. And I think that we're mostly all in agreement on that. But I think we're also in agreement for a large portion of people who follow college sports that this has gotten ridiculous and, something's got to change. We're never going to go back to the way that things were, but we need to find sensible solutions for the future that don't violate antitrust laws and other legal borders to keep college sports closer to the spirit of what college sports is supposed to be. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, for sure. It's one of those things we talk about the NCAA. It feels like it's getting more and more like the NBA every day with, NIL, ability to transfer. I feel like you have to have a little bit of accountability, especially at this stage in life to help these players, grow and develop. You can't just skip out because somebody else is offering you more money. If you get to the NBA, you'll get to that level at some point and be able to do those things. But it's kind of one of these things we've got to find the line in the sand and not cross it with NIL and transferability. You shouldn't just be able to transfer on a whim, but also if this situation isn't fitting you, you should be able to look elsewhere.
I think a lot of people look at the transfer portal and the NIL and they think of it all as one issue because they came out right about this exact same time. If the transfer portal and the NIL weren't factors upon each other at the exact same time, I think the entire country would be looking at this thing differently, at the end of the day. But I think you say line in the sand. I think back to what Justice Ginsburg once said when she had an interview talking about the way that American politics work. And trust me, this is not a politics podcast. We're not going to go that far into. But one of the things that she was talking about was the fact that America is really like a pendulum. And in one way that we move one direction and then over time we move back into another direction, but we never rest at the same place that we were. And I find that really fascinating is because I feel like with the NIL and transfer portal, the pendulum really swung hard in the direction of players. And it deserved to go that way because the NCAA hadn't been taking care of the players that they needed to. Some of the rules were archaic. We needed change. But it's possible that pendulum has getting closer to, and that's what the changes came from last year, is that it needed to go back a little bit more in favor of the schools, because don't forget, yes, these players are making money off their name, image, likeness in the schools with the collectives and everything are paying players to play and so on and so forth. But at the end of the day, too, the schools are offering you free college. They're offering you free college. They're giving you the opportunity to use their, be part of their brand of school to you boost your NIL opportunities around their name at Arkansas and Kentucky or wherever, Florida. And so it needs to go back a little bit more in favor, not just for the school's sake, but for the fans' sake, because they're invested in this too. With the NIL collectives, fans are paying money to have a player come to their school just for them to turn around and leave the next year. So I think sensible solutions are on the way. But I think this is a little bit more return and just, while it tried to swing back to where it was last year or closer to, I think it went a little too far in the court's eyes. And so right now, more practical solutions are going to be on the way. But I think at least we're all pretty much in agreement at this point. Go to class, get your grades. You have to be academically eligible to play. I think those are things that we can all agree that if you're not going to do that, you need to go play in semi-pro sports until you're old enough to go play. Until you're old enough to go play somewhere else. So, until you're old enough for the NBA draft, or you're old enough for the NFL draft in football's case, or the MLB draft or whatever. But my thoughts, my craziness.
Yeah, for sure. It's one of those things I feel like it's going to change year by year. They're trying to get back to um, a solid spot in the middle. Um, so we'll keep up with it, and we'll see how things change throughout the season, beginning of next season as we move forward.
I am pro player. I am also a believer that we should the school does have some right, like to make sure that that players are living up to their end of the bargain. All right, Maddie, let's go team by team on this. Let's go through it because there's a lot of news that broke down for every team. So let's go through the transfer classes that have taken place so far.
Yeah, let's start out with Alabama. They have been busy in the portal. Houston Mallett, Chris Youngblood, and of course the huge addition of Aiden Holloway coming from Auburn.
Yeah, the Aiden Holloway ad is massive. This is a huge loss for Auburn, and it's a big part now of what's going to be going forward the Auburn Alabama rivalry for next season. So, as the saying goes, we share blood, but we are not brothers. It's all these Mortal Kombat quotes coming out. And like mid-January, things really changed for Holloway this season. And you could see it in the stat sheet. He had huge games against Baylor and Indiana, and then he evaporates. Aiden Holloway is expected to have a huge season next year, according to Evan Maya. He's top 10 according to their data in the transfer portal. I also think he's an incredible fit for Nate Oates' offense. He was projected to have his game grow a little every season and make the NBA by the end of next year or after year 3. So I don't care what Auburn fans are saying on social media about like, oh, he played terrible. Like, why would we care? This is a big loss. This is a big loss to them, and it's a great move for Aiden Holloway. Pure talent wise, Holloway may be the most talented guard on Alabama's roster next year. His offensive projection, according to Evan Maya, is higher than the average of Alabama's top 10 offensive players last year. Think about that. Aiden Holloway makes what was already one of the best offenses in the country better. Only concern is defense because I'm pretty confident he'll fit well in the Nate Oates system as an undersized guard. It's a huge loss to Auburn, and it's a massive pickup in Alabama. I'll see if I eat my words later, but kid's darn good. And I'm looking out for him over the next season because like I really think the growth from year 1 to year 2 for Aiden Holloway should be fantastic for him as a player and developing as an NBA prospect.
Yeah, for sure. We talked about Aiden Holloway quite a bit in our um, freshman top 15 coming into Auburn and what a huge asset he was going to be for that team. So looking at just the way that Nate Oates' system works and the offense and, how they made that Final Four run, I think Aiden Holloway can play a huge piece into that moving forward.
Well, if you looked at the analytics behind it, he was an upgrade from Wendell Green last year. Like, that was the thing. If you looked at the analytics, Aiden Holloway was an upgrade, and then his playing time goes down, his usage rate and the offense changes, everything changed. And I don't know what the thought process was from Bruce Pearl, but this is a huge loss, and I think it goes straight to Alabama's benefit. So I would not be happy about this if I was an Auburn fan. He could have literally gone anywhere else, and I probably would have lived with it a little bit more. Instead, you go to my school's biggest rivalry. Whew, that's a tough one.
It'd be a tough pill to swallow for sure. Let's move on to Arkansas. So far, it's been pretty quiet on the Arkansas front. Only Big Z has been added to the roster so far for the Hogs. He was out at the softball game this weekend, making the hog call, already making his name around campus. But so far, not a lot of movement in terms of roster changes or portal for Arkansas.
Yeah, but I expect something to happen soon. Worry expends energy for no purpose. There are players that are rumored to be coming to Arkansas's way, who have not publicly committed yet. Why, you'd have to ask them why they haven't done it yet. But something is going to drop soon for Arkansas if what I'm hearing is true. There are names out there that a lot of players, and one of them is going to make an announcement soon. So there's players that I'm pretty confident are coming to Arkansas at this point that we're just waiting on an announcement from. And some of those are freshmen, some of those are portal guys. And I've seen Arkansas in plenty of also top 5s and top 4s for players making cuts like Duthiero. I don't know who's coming, who's going to be the first one to announce, but I've heard plenty of names. Like, if I was to guess how many players are actually on Arkansas's roster right now, I would say there's probably 3 that aren't officially on Arkansas's roster at this point.
Yeah, I spoke with Caleb from Whoopig Weekly a little bit yesterday, and just kind of the differences that we're starting to see this year. We went from Eric Musselman, who was very vocal, who
Arkansas has contacted.
yeah, anytime they reached out to a player, you were going to see it within the day. And now we've got Cal, who's a little bit more behind the scenes, who's not as vocal on social media, who likes to have things, inked, T's crossed, I's dotted before anything is said. So I think we're going to see a lot more movement closer to decision day when players have had enough time to, mull it over and know for sure that this is where they're going to be.
Yeah, certainly.
All right, moving on to Auburn. Auburn has added a guard and JP Pegs. I probably butchered that.
I think it's Pegasus. Yeah.
Pegasus. Okay.
Pigs.
I don't know.
Furman, I know that. I've seen him play.
I was about to say we will hear his name. I know we will. So
Yeah, certainly. Yeah, I'm waiting for some more movement from Auburn. It's been fairly quiet, like Arkansas and some other. Their biggest news this week was that Janai Broom is coming back for next season, and that's really solid for them. And also, where was Janai Broom going to go? He really just was not yet to the point where you thought NBA. He's going to be probably a guy that gets picked up in free agency next season. So Janai Broom coming back, I think, was a really good move for him overall, and it's a good move for Auburn as well. So that's a good get back for Auburn.
yeah, definitely. I know a lot of fans were excited to see that one. So seeing a little bit more security in their team, especially after the big move from Aiden Holloway. And like I said, I think we'll see some more movement coming in as we get further and closer to decision day. Moving on to Florida. Florida is adding Sam Alexis and Ruben Chin.
Washington State.
Yep.
Washington State.
Washington State. He's a center. He's a big guy. You won't miss him. You may not be able to pronounce his name, but you won't miss him on the floor.
I'll tell you what, by the time we get around the next season, we're going to be able to pronounce everybody's name. But yeah, decent front court pieces for a team that's losing Samuel. I'll be interested to see what happens with Richard and Clayton as they're testing out the NBA waters. They also might be in the running for Elijah Martin if rumors are right. So that was the other thing that we were talking about. I know he says 100% on Ole Miss for what On3 says, but if rumors are in other places, I would not count Florida out for that Elijah Martin move.
You can't believe everything you read on the internet, David.
No, you can't, but you can take a lot of people who are insiders. So I don't
state over. Do what? Go ahead.
I don't believe everything. I just kind of, this is the rumor. This is what we got to work with. It's a lot of what this is talking about rumors.
True. Moving on to the next state over, Georgia has added Montgomery out of Mount St. Mary's.
Yeah, another team I'm waiting for movement out on. Georgia can be a good team next year, but they got to start adding some pieces here pretty quickly. Is what it is, because like they've got really good talented players sitting on their roster right now. They got to figure out a way to supplement those guys.
Yeah, and something we're not really used to. There's been no official movement into Kentucky so far.
Yeah, it's going to happen, though. There's plenty of players that I've heard names of and things like that. It's going to happen. Players are going to play for Kentucky. Like it's just hasn't happened yet. So we're just waiting for those names to pop in. If a couple of those things like Great Osabor or Amari Williams come true, then we'll definitely be seeing the some bigger names coming into Kentucky here pretty quickly. And trust me, with the NIL money they have, they're not going to just be sitting on their hands for the entire portion of time. So waiting for some movement out of Kentucky.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things we're waiting for the waters to calm after the coaching hire, let him get settled in, get some contacts going. So probably just one of those things, like you said, it's coming. It's going to happen.
Yeah, 100%.
And also no movement from LSU since last week, but they've got Cam Carter and Jordan Spears both coming in.
Yep, and we're also waiting. We'll see how Jalen Cook does in the NBA. He has declared, so he's not coming back for LSU. But yeah, there's some good players coming in for LSU and Cam Carter and Jordan Spears. We'll see how this team finishes its shaping out for the rest of the transfer portal cycle.
Yep, moving on to Ole Miss. They have added Mikel Brown-Jones and Malik Dia, Dre Davis, and David Barnes.
And there is more coming for Ole Miss. I can almost guarantee you they're going to be a really solid team next year. And additionally, Musa Cisse also just put his name in the portal this weekend. So he'll be playing for another team again next season. This is the guys who are playing a lot of different ways for a portal. You know what? Go get your money off NIL, man. Yeah, I totally get it. So, but yeah, there's some movement out of Ole Miss. They look pretty solid, and there's more on the way, I feel like.
And Mississippi State added Michael Nwako out of Miami.
Yeah, not the biggest add in history in the portal, but it gives some more depth now to this Mississippi State team that's lost a couple of pieces in the portal. But looks like Jans is putting together a decent roster for next year.
Yeah, and so far for this season, we have seen Mizzou get more wins in the transfer portal than we did all season last year.
Yeah,
They have been downright busy. They have added some serious talent in the portal to supplement the top 10 freshman class with Jacob Cruz, Tony Perkins, Marquise Warwick, and Mark Mitchell.
Yeah, I was ready to make Tony Perkins meme, but Tony Perkis is who's from Heavyweights with Ben Stiller. So that one was I wanted to make a meme, but it was just didn't pay up. But yeah, this is the best transfer class so far in this cycle. Dennis Gates got straight down to business, knowing he needed to add experienced players to help out this young Mizzou team. Here's your Mortal Kombat quote: "Vacate my throne." Mizzou could seriously go from worst to first next season. I think they're 1 or 2 players away from making a serious contender for an SEC title and going very deep into March. We talked about making a champion during March, and we've got to ask who's going to be those 2 out of 3 players that are going to lead your team in scoring. They need to be upperclassmen, and all these guys Mizzou went out and got from the portal scored in double figures last season. Cruz and Warwick both averaged over 19 points a game last year. Then Mitchell, coming from Duke, and Perkins from Iowa, already have experience playing at a very high level at the P6 level. This is an exciting roster for Mizzou, and Mizzou can be downright dangerous next year.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be an interesting year. Like you said, we could see a complete turnaround from this team. But we'll see once they hit the floor how much chemistry this team has and what they'll be able to build going into the season.
Yeah, and also an update from this weekend that I didn't get into our notes here. Jordan Butler, who I was expecting to be part of this team, and I thought that he would be a very interesting swing piece with Peyton Marshall, their freshman center, because they're 2 different style centers. I was really looking forward to seeing Butler playing out there because he's a stretch 5. So I thought, yeah, that'll be a heck of a combination in your front court. But Jordan Butler hitting the transfer portal, he's a decent player. And so I'll be curious to see who picks up Jordan Butler. I know there's a lot of speculation that playing time was an issue and why he decided to move on, because last year he didn't get all the playing time he probably felt like he deserved over, Connor Vanover. So we'll see where Jordan Butler lands. He's a good player. Someone's going to pick up Jordan Butler, and he may be hanging around this conference. So we'll see.
And maybe we'll see him go over to a school like Oklahoma, who currently has no incoming players so far.
Yeah, that's crazy. They do have Jalen Moore, who's currently testing the NBA waters, who may come back, but Oklahoma lost a lot of talent on this team. What did they lose production wise? They lost 73.5% of their scoring from this season. And right now they're looking at guys, they don't have a single player who averaged double figures for them on the roster right now, and losing Uzan away and Hugley, they lost a lot of guys that really mattered for their team. And I'm concerned what's going on in Oklahoma. They got 5 open roster spots. I'll be curious to see what happens with Porter Moser's squad next year, because he put together a good team that was threatening for the NCAA tournament. So curious to see what happens in Oklahoma next.
Yeah, for sure. Another team that I'm a little bit surprised to see nothing coming in so far for is South Carolina.
Yeah, Josh Gray just put his name in the portal. Nothing happening though for South Carolina, but they did just make a move with Cam Scott for the freshman class out of Texas. He's going to be going to South Carolina instead. We'll talk about that more in a little bit. But Gray putting his name in the portal, Gray had times showed flashes of being a very, very good player, and as a 7-foot senior, experienced, center, he's a good grab. So I would be curious to see where Josh Gray ends up next season.
For sure. Moving on to Tennessee, the Vols add Darlington DeBar out of Hofstra.
17 points a game and a really solid 3-point shooter. Could be the guy to replace Vescovy on this roster for next season. You got points. You've got to put back on this roster. A lot of work to do for Tennessee to get back to where they were next season, but this was a good grab. Still looking for depth in that front court, and they've got to find a major scoring threat, I feel like. Those are the things that I feel like Tennessee needs to do. But this is a good add to start putting pieces back into place for next season.
Definitely. Moving on to Texas. They have been busy. Tremont Mark, Jason Kent, and Julian Larry all going to be Longhorns.
Yeah, that Mark grab is a good pickup for Texas. Was definitely Arkansas's. If he wasn't Arkansas's best player last season, he was at least their most consistent player. Only problem I had with Mark was that he averaged nearly as many assists as he did turnovers. The turnover to assist ratio was like 1-for-1 with Tremont Mark, and then not less than ideal. And he also had a tendency to opt to the mid range a little too quickly, in my opinion. But great player. And I think he was used wrong at Arkansas in a lot of different ways. And I think like he always was, to me, a player that should be coming off and being your sixth man to be a consistent scoring threat because he can get his own bucket. And I think that would have made him a very dynamic piece for when you get your first rotation of scorers in, then you put Tremont Mark out there in the second wave as a sixth man. I think that would have been solid for Mark. And I'll be curious to see how Texas uses him next season.
Yeah, I think he'll be a good fit for Rodney Terry. I think it's a good move for Texas, pulling him in there. Speaking of our other Texas school, Texas A&M, crickets. Nothing.
Yeah, no one leaving, no one coming in. Aggies only got one open roster spot to fill, so I'm not surprised that maybe Buzz is taking his time to find the right guy here. Aggies only lost 22% of their scoring from graduation this year. Give Buzz credit, kids clearly want to play for him. So, when you're only losing just that little bit, like clearly you're doing something right. So not a lot of movement. Just need to go find one kid to make sure your roster's good. I mean, Texas A&M's going to look consistent, I think.
Yeah, for sure. Talking about swings here, we're going from a team that only lost about 20% of their scoring to a team that lost 80. Vanderbilt is having to put together a whole new crew for this season, but so far they've added Jalen Carey, Tyler Nickel, MJ Collins, and Grant Huffman.
We talked about a few of these guys last week. Huffman is an interesting add out of Davidson. Hits the three big stats, as well as a guard. Yeah, he hits the big three stats well as a guard. That's what my note meant there. He scores about 12 points a game, grabs 5 rebounds a night, and gets five assists a night. Good player, good ad. Yeah, Vanderbilt doesn't look like right now with the players that they're adding, like they're just gonna set the world on fire for next year, but they look like they're going to be a good squad. And what I mean by that is that from top to bottom, Vanderbilt looks like they're going to be a potentially good team. And so like that could be a team that if you get things going right, maybe we're talking about a chance to make the NCAA tournament or the NIT. So I like where the direction's going, and I think Mark Byington's doing a good job right now his first off season.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, Vanderbilt, not a whole lot of expectations on Mark Byington. It's his first year. Like we said, 80% of the scoring has left this squad. So I think getting a team together and performing, maybe getting a couple of wins, is going to be big for him. I think right now focusing on Vanderbilt is forward progression. We're going to see how this first season goes, and there are good signs that people are already wanting to come play for him. So as they build some prominence, I think hopefully in the first season, we'll see them slowly move forward.
Yep. All right. So there have been a lot of moves in the freshman front that need to be talked about, and we're going to get more and more as we closer to season. Talk some freshman basketball situation. But like one of the big storylines we were talking about last week was who's going to stay for Kentucky on their freshman roster. And here, just if you're watching on YouTube, look at the graphic right now. Any one of those names with a line through it have decommitted from Kentucky. Out of this class that was put together that was ranked second, they're down to one player, and it's 4-star Travis Perry. But yeah, there's a lot of players out there with their names trying to find a new school and everything else. They're gone. This is crazy just to go through the names. You got Quintons, Flan, Cyril, Knox, Richmond, all out. And you got 2 freshmen coming in, and Travis Perry and Carter, who was part of the class of 2022, 2 4-stars coming in. This is crazy. Like I didn't expect Kentucky to keep much of their freshman class, but like everyone's gone. So Maddie, where do you think like some of these kids are going to land? Like I know some of them are rumored to Arkansas, some of them are taking visits to other schools. Like out of this situation, obviously, Kentucky's going to have to do well in the portal. But what are your general thoughts on just how much Kentucky's lost?
I mean, we saw a lot, especially after Calip. We saw a lot of players put their name in the transfer portal, a lot trying to get out of their national letters of intent. So I think Mark Pope has quite a bit of work to do. I think, he may be able to retain a few of those that put their name in the transfer portal if, the money's right, honestly. But a major kind of mind blown moment for all Kentucky fans going from top two freshman incoming class. Amazing roster that helped them get to the NCAA tournament. So Mark Pope's got a lot of work to do in Kentucky.
Yeah, he does. But the good thing is he's got the NIL money. He's got the brand to do it. So we'll see how that shapes out. But this is just a major loss in what you got going in, because right now Arkansas has nothing. Kentucky's currently sitting at 100% of their scoring production from last year gone. And mind you, that was a top 20 offense. So like, yeah, this is a little bit concerning on how you're going to replace this and what Kentucky's going to look like next year. But I'm sure the players are going to come in for everything else. But I'm waiting now to see what these freshmen do, because now that they're out there floating around in the freshman world of non-commit, there's I know Carter Knox has been rumored to Arkansas and other things like that. Same with Somto Cyrell, but we'll see, because I also saw things from OTE and other places saying that may not be the case. So we'll see what happens. It's a lot of talent out there. Cam Scott goes to South Carolina instead of Texas, and I'm going to lose one of my favorite pictures of the year with Cam Scott sitting in that cowboy hat, lounge back. My brother called it like one of the creepiest photos he's ever seen in his life. I loved it. I thought it was hilarious. Cam Scott decided he's staying home in South Carolina instead of heading to Austin to play for the Longhorns. Scott had this to say: definitely, first and foremost, being around my family and everyone I grew up with, just being close to home. That's really one of the biggest things I was looking for at this go around. But secondly, I wanted to be with the winning program as well. I believe Coach Paris and company have a lot of bright things in their future. So just looking at how the past 2 seasons with Coach Paris and what they have going on and what they've been building up, I've got some inside connections, so I get to talk to other players as well. But just getting to know like what's going on behind the scenes, so when we can put on a big display in front of everybody, was pretty much the biggest thing that really took my heart. Lamont Paris giving players a reason to stay home in the Carolinas, Maddie. Last season was huge for Carolina. How much of an impact do you think that made for Cam Scott?
Oh, I think it was a major impact. He wanted to go to a winning program. And after Lamont Paris proved that that's something that he can provide, obviously gave Cam Scott a reason to rethink his commitment and decide to stay home. I'm sure there are several players in the South Carolina, North Carolina, maybe even Kentucky region, now that Kentucky's may or may not be the front runner to pull players anymore. Lamont Paris is making it interesting over there for South Carolina fans.
Yeah, let's not forget, G.G. Jackson committed to South Carolina. And while things may have not been the best situation with G.G. Jackson, Lamont Paris put players in the league. He just got out of league with a good season. It's not that Texas has not been successful, but when you get a chance to stay home and you get a chance to get a coach who's going to help you get into the NBA and you're an NBA prospect, yeah, I think this is a good move for Cam Scott overall. I think this is a good fit. I think it's a fun situation. I hate it for Texas fans because this is a good player that you're missing out on. But for South Carolina, man, you got to feel good about this, because it's a great player in what was, no offense to their freshman class, just very middle of the pack coming in the next season. Because without Cam Scott, you had Trent Noah, who was a 3-star, and Federico, who was also a 3-star, and both those guys were sitting out. ESPN didn't even have them ranked, and on 3, about 90 down. Federico was 195 on 24/7's rankings, and just guys who are more depth pieces almost, and not instant starters. So Cam Scott's a really good ad, I feel like, for South Carolina. All right, Maddie, we got to watch round 1 of the NBA this weekend, playing tournaments over and everything like that. But we got some SEC players, and this was a really fun stat I realized when I was putting my list together, is that every SEC or every NBA team has at least one SEC player on it for these playoffs. And this is going to be a star-studded league here, or playoff, if you're an SEC basketball fan. In the East, like let's just run through it. In the East, you got Celtics playing the Heat. You got the Cavs playing the Magic, Bucks playing the Pacers, Knicks playing the 76ers in the East. And then in the West, you get the Thunder playing the Pelicans, Clippers playing the Mavericks, and that'll be today. Timberwolves playing the Suns, and the Nuggets playing the Lakers. Maddie, out of all those games, what team are you the most interested to watch? And if you say the team I think you're going to name, I'm going to make you say another.
Well, I've got two teams
Let's
that
start with the East.
I'm
Let's go with the
what
East. Who's your East team first?
East teams. Let's go Celtics. Jordan Walsh from Arkansas. Um, Finally getting that a little bit of playing time over there. So excited to watch him, see how he's grown. But in that game, there are 9 SEC players in the
Mm-hmm.
Heat against the Celtics. You got Josh Richardson, Bam Adebayo, Tyler Hero, all playing for the Heat. In the Celtics, you got JD Davidson, Al Horford, Luke Cornett, Jaden Springer, and Jordan Walsh. If you're an SEC fan, that's a game you want to tune into because it's a big alumni fest over there.
It definitely is, and Al Horford's been around for a hot minute, for the Celtics. But Celtics are a fun team to watch. Not having Jimmy Butler is going to be a problem for the Heat, since he seems to be out right now. So I'm curious to see how Tyler Hero does in that series. For the Cavs and the Magic, like Anthony Black, I didn't see him get much minutes, and granted, I was kind of casually watching, but I'd like to see Anthony Black get out there just a little bit for the Magic, just a little bit. But yeah, you got Admiral Schofield also on this Magic team. Isaac Okoro from Auburn, a couple of Vandy guys, and Darius Garland and Damian Jones. Then you got some Texas guys and Jared Allen and Tristan Thompson. And then this is who I thought you were going to name, because I thought you were going to say the Milwaukee Bucks, because oh boy, don't the Bucks look fun? You got Patrick Beverly, Chris Livingston out of Kentucky, Chris Middleton out of Texas A&M, Bobby Portis out of Arkansas, and Ty Washington Jr. out of Kentucky. And then for the Pacers, you got Isaiah Jackson, Quentin Jackson, Aaron Naismith out of Vanderbilt, Oscar Tshiebwe out of Kentucky, and Miles Turner. I like the Bucks in this series, but this is one that I've seen of the upset being called for the Pacers a lot in that series. Maddie, any thoughts on that one?
Yeah, the Bucks was my other team I was gonna name. Me, big Bobby Portis fan. Feel like he should have been the sixth man of the year several years over by now. So we'll see what he does in this series, but I think he is obviously going to dominate.
As a Central Arkansas guy, I love watching me some Bobby Portis. And then the Knicks got Julius Randle, Jericho Sims, Jacob Toppin. 76ers are loaded. Mo Bamba, Ricky Council, Tobias Harris, Buddy Hield, Kai Jones, and Tyrese Maxey. Six SEC players on that team. Let's turn over to the West and what has been a pretty solid team for the Thunder. You got Alexander, Isaiah Joe, Sar, Wallace, and Jalen Williams for the Thunder, and Herbert Jones playing for the Pelicans in this one. Maddie, who do you like out of the West, by the way?
The Thunder. Give me the Thunder all day, every day.
Yeah, I figured you wanted the Thunder. Not only is it Arkansas, but you're close to it as well. Yeah, I get it.
Okay. Thunder or the Mavs. Those are, I don't usually root for NBA team, like specific NBA teams. I like to watch specific players, but the Thunder and the Mavs, those are my go-tos. Also some huge names for the Mavericks as well. We got Alex Fudge, Daniel Gafford, AJ Lawson, and PJ Washington all playing down in Dallas.
Yep, and that's what I was going to say. Mavs are the team that I follow in the NBA. Very happy to have Daniel Gafford on board for the Mavs. Hopefully we can beat the Clippers. Of course, they got Brandon Boston Jr., Kobe Brown, and PJ Tucker on the Clippers. And then the Minnesota Timberwolves have Karl Anthony Towns, Naz Reid, and Anthony Edwards. They looked pretty darn good yesterday against the Phoenix Suns, who welcome to the SEC Kevin Durant, and Devin Booker, Bradley Beal, and Saban Lee for the Suns on that one as well. Doesn't Corliss coach also for the Timberwolves?
Yes, he is one of the assistants.
Yep. So Corliss Williamson, if you're an Arkansas fan, is one of the coaches for the Minnesota Timberwolves. All right. And then last night we got to watch the Lakers play the Nuggets. Nuggets took over that game. But yeah, you got Caldwell Pope out of Georgia, DeAndre Jordan out of Texas A&M, Jamal Murray, Michael Porter Jr., and then we talked about the Lakers with our play-in talk, Anthony Davis, Austin Reeves, Jackson Hayes, Colin Casson, Skylar Mays, Demoy Hodge, Jared Vanderbilt, just a ton of names on the Lakers team with guys with SEC connections. Natty, so out of the names that we mentioned, I don't know if you saw the graphic or not, but do you have any guess are the top 3 teams with players in this NBA playoff?
Well, I feel like one's pretty obvious. We got to go Kentucky.
Kentucky's number 1. Yes.
think Arkansas's. I don't think they're top three. They like number 4.
Arkansas's top 3. Arkansas's third.
Arkansas's top 3. Okay.
I will ask you if you think the 4th team is.
And Auburn, maybe?
Not Auburn.
Not Auburn. Ooh. Let's see.
It's going to surprise
you. Tennessee.
It's not Tennessee. They're not top 4.
Yeah. Alabama's got a lot of names on this list.
No, they only got 2.
Only got 2?
Mm-hmm. Alabama's only got 2.
Oh, it's all like ARs. It's not the ALs. Right. But surprisingly, we've got quite a few players from Vandy in here too.
That's who's 4th. Vanderbilt's 4th with 5th. Or we're at 5. They have 5 players. They're 4th with 5 players in this. So the top 3 are Kentucky with 19 players in the NBA playoffs, Texas with 10, Arkansas with 8, and Vanderbilt with 5. Arkansas, outside the top 4, Arkansas, Texas, and Kentucky have double or more the amount of players that are in everyone. That's crazy. Like the amount. Now that's obviously Arkansas had players who didn't make it, and same with the other schools too. Like it's just funny though how this shaped out because Moses Moody doesn't make it. I was trying to think of who else. Nick Smith Jr. didn't make it. Obviously for Alabama, Brandon Miller's not in there, and neither's Noah Clowney. So like yeah, obviously teams are missing players, and like this isn't representative necessarily of just how many players. Obviously Kentucky's huge. Like we all figured Kentucky's going to be there for a while. But like yeah, it's just crazy that those 3 teams had double the amount of all the other teams when it comes out of the top 5, except the exception being Vanderbilt, who just kind of surprised. It just kind of shows Vanderbilt's a better has gotten talent in the past, and they do better than what everybody thinks they kind of do. And, they've got plenty of NBA talent. You can build a good program at Vandy. It's a tough job. It's not an impossible job.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I know Scottie Pippen Jr. also on that list of players that didn't make it, but played at Vanderbilt as well.
Yeah, definitely. His name's out there as well, and good talented piece. But yeah, there's tons of players out there. Like I said, the only team with only a single player in though is that South Carolina was able to sneak one in, and it was off of what team was it? I got to go back through the list here and find it. It's on the Mavericks and AJ Lawson. They snuck one player in to the playoffs. So good for South Carolina making the list because there were a couple of schools who didn't make it. Didn't have players like Ole Miss and Mississippi State. So South Carolina able to get a player in on the list. Hey guys, thank you for checking out this week's episode. If you have not liked and subscribed to the Hoop Southbound Show, we'd greatly appreciate it. Please follow us anywhere you get your podcast. We love having you guys here, and we're here all off season to talk about this stuff. We're going to be back next week talking another update on the transfer portal. And then pretty soon we're going to be turning over a little bit more conversation toward the NBA draft. We're already getting started this week on they won't be coming out to you, but we're recording them as we are our scouting reports on the SEC players that are headed to the NBA. You can check out on the channel now that you can see the video is posted, not live yet, and it won't be live until May. The episode on Rob Dillingham. These will be about 5 to 8 minute long videos on these players and a breakdown of what scouts are talking about when it comes to some of the top guys making it in the NBA draft.
We hope you guys check that out. Stick around for our top portal projections as those continue to roll out. But like David said, we've got a lot of stuff coming up. Just because it's the off season doesn't mean you don't have to pay attention to basketball because it's going to be wild by the time the season rolls around.
And it's going to be fun. We'll be also talking a little bit more of the NBA playoffs, just kind of casually and fun because it gives us basketball to talk about while we're in a dead period here. But guys, thank you so much, and like and subscribe, and we'll catch you guys next week.
Thanks, guys. Have a great week.